Welcome to the podcast. I'm Rosa Coelho, your host, lifestyle entrepreneur, health coach, and speaker. I've gone from being in complete overwhelm, burning the candle at both ends, and watching my health, relationships, and business suffer, to creating a life with more joy, ease, and abundance. If you're ready to let go of the overwhelm, reclaim your health, and push past your comfort zone so that you can unleash your next level of success to create a greater impact, then sit back as we delve into conversations as well as bring on guests to share with you tools, knowledge, and real action steps to get you there. Listen in, because you never know when you may hear something that changes everything. Hello, beautiful friend, and welcome to this first interview of 2024. I am thrilled to bring you this one. This definitely is by design, and I had hoped that this would be my first interview. And I say that because it took a little bit of stepping out of my comfort zone to ask this person if they would like to be a guest. And I say that because the person that is on is someone that I've admired from afar, I would say probably since about 2007, my early days as a personal trainer in London, England. The person is Bangs, and Bangs is an incredible life coach and spin instructor. I say spin instructor, and I don't say that lightly, because her spin classes in London, UK were incredibly sought after, and her clients still reach out to her. This year, Bangs totally went out of her comfort zone and decided to create an online studio. With no skills on how to do this, she just got down to work and made it happen. And I followed her journey, and it was absolutely remarkable. I admired Bangs because since 2007, I would say back in those days, there weren't a lot of female trainers with blogs. And she was one of the first ones, BangsandaBun. And I remember following her content, and I just thought, wow, like this person really is at the forefront, because like I said, there weren't many others doing it. And so our little blogging community was quite small, and now everyone has a website, and even websites I think are starting to pass on by. However, Bangs just keeps moving forward with whatever the next thing is. As we speak, she is British, but she's also now living in Canada. She's living in Montreal, where now she needs to learn French, which is not the easiest thing to do, and yet she goes for it. It's her resilience that really spoke to me. And so that's why we're calling this episode Building Resilience and the Art of Never Giving Up, because that's exactly what Bangs does. And this is also how she transforms people's lives, is by teaching and coaching them to do the same. Sit back and enjoy this episode, because this one is a transformational one. All right. Hi, Bangs. How are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. Well, I was so excited to have you on. I'm sure you saw my Instagram story where I said I was actually nervous to ask you. I'm always looking for really fabulous guests, but you're definitely someone that I have followed since 2007, 2008, or right around the time we were both in London. And it was like, for people listening, blogging wasn't a thing. It's not like now with social media. Like in London, England, there was just like a very small handful of women that were blogging and putting out like their services as personal trainers and life coaches and all the things. And so I started following you early days. And so for me, it's so exciting for us to connect on this podcast and to chat.
Yeah, it's really surreal when you meet people who you've followed for like a long time. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like we know each other already, and it's so funny. Yeah.
Tell us, let's start off with your journey. Like start off with, I know that you're now living in Canada, which was wild. I had no idea you were Canadian probably until like I'd say the last few months when I caught something that you said on Instagram. Tell me about that, and tell me about your fitness journey. How did you come about it and start helping people?
Okay. Wow.
It's
Lots of
loaded.
ground to cover.
It's loaded.
Lots
You
of
take as
ground.
long as you need.
Okay. So the Canadian connection. I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. My dad is from there, born and raised. My mum's Irish. We ended up moving to England randomly, as you do, when I was about 5. So I've always had dual citizenship. And probably around 2018, my parents decided they wanted to retire back to Canada. And I figured, they're both well and healthy, but they, when your parents are a certain age and you just kind of feel responsible for, like, God forbid anything were to happen to them and then I'm an ocean away. So I thought, I'm not going to do that. I will also move. So we all ended up moving back to Halifax, Nova Scotia in 2020. And I am a city person. I've lived in big cities my whole life. Halifax is more of it's technically a city, but for me, in terms of my experience and where I've come from, it's a somewhat large-ish town, really, to me. And I don't mean that as any disrespect. It just kind of on the levels that where I've lived, that's kind of how I would class it. And it just wasn't quite the right fit for me. So I moved to Montreal in July of this year. So I've been here like almost 6 months now. So that's my Canada, Halifax, Montreal, London connection. And what was the other part of that question? How I got into fitness. Okay, so huge couch potato for many, many years, basically. In my youth, I was a dancer, and that is what I wanted to do. I was very determined to, like, really technically, according to young me, I should be like a very famed choreographer at this point in my life. That's where I thought my life was heading. And it didn't quite pan out that way. I was kind of, if you want to be a dancer, you have to make that decision when you're very, very young and dedicate yourself to it fully and completely at that stage. And it just felt all a bit intense for me to make that choice when I didn't really feel like I had enough education under my belt, etc. So dance has always been a part of my life. Even still, I every now and then I love to just go and take a dance class randomly. I love dance. I think it's the most beautiful art form. But after I kind of stopped dancing very, very regularly, my level of physical activity just kind of faded to black, just not a whole lot was going on. And I just literally found myself really just being a couch potato, very, very limited movement. And, to cut to the chase, I got to like my late 20s and found that I was like getting really like winded going up a flight of stairs even, and I thought that's not healthy. I don't think that should be happening. And so I had been living in Canada for a few years. I'd moved back to England. This is when I was probably about 29. And I thought, well, I'm not in a good place physically. If I'm literally finding that I'm being winded walking up a flight of stairs, I'm going to turn this around. So I decided to get into boxing, which is hilarious now when I think about it, in terms of like, literally going from zero activity to the first thing you try being like one of the most intense things. But I found this really like down and dirty boxing gym in Leeds that I just became obsessed with it. And it was like a religion to me. Just every Thursday I would go, and it was like 25 dudes and me, and but they were just like the loveliest, most supportive group of people. And it really helped to get my fitness level up, right? Boxing, I think just generally, it really activates your cardio super fast. Mm-hmm. And off the back of that, I was blogging, as you mentioned, at the time. And you know how it is when you first kind of get into something, and I have quite an obsessive personality anyway. And so the boxing had really like taken over my life. And I was blogging about that, and some very eagle-eyed PR person saw this blog post of mine, and I would say like mistakenly at the time thought I was super fit and asked me if I wanted to run a half marathon and blog about it. And I was like, sure, even though I've like literally have not run since I was probably in primary school at that point. And so began my journey into running. And that kind of took over my life for, I would say I was very, very into that for probably about 5 years. I did 13 half marathons, 2 full marathons, was blogging about it heavily. And that was kind of in that era where, I mean, I guess now I would have been referred to as an influencer. Like at that time, there were so few of us bloggers around. I was kind of very early doors fitness blogger, if you will, at that point. My blog had started out in 2007, probably as like just fashion and opinion pieces and all this kind of thing. It became very, very fitness focused after I found running. And then off the back of that, people would come to me all the time and say, like, where can I train with you? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I'm just a chick who likes running, you know, I wasn't like trained or qualified in anything. But enough people asked me that eventually I took the hint, and I had been doing a bit of work with a spin studio in London. I was writing their newsletters and things. And eventually I just had spent enough time around the studio where I was listening to classes happening and stuff. And I thought, well, I think I could probably do that. And so I mentioned it to the owner. I think I'd maybe like to become an instructor. And she was like, oh my God, I was hoping you would ask. So she got me trained up. And yeah, the rest is history, I guess. You know, I became a spin instructor there in London and became very, very successful there in what I was doing, and have trained numerous other instructors during my time there. And then, yeah, did the same thing when I moved over here to Canada.
That's amazing. I love your story because you go with the flow and you put your whole heart into it. And it's funny, like how, as you're talking about these different stages, like I remember your blog with those kind of things. And I relate with the parent situation too. It's why I ended up back in Canada, even though I love London. I think it's always going to feel like my home. And when I arrived there, I'm always like, oh, I feel like I could breathe. Like I just love it.
Same, yeah.
There's nothing like it. And then running too, I had never ran and then got into running in London too. I don't know, it's amazing, those connections, and it's amazing where it starts to lead you. And I think the running too is what led me into the world of personal training and feeling like maybe I could do this. So what I love is you're so resilient. Like why I wanted to have you on the podcast was, it wasn't that long ago. I was watching your Instagram. I don't know. It's, you know, with the algorithm, I don't know why it popped up, but it did. And it was this one post. And we're going to be talking a lot about your posts because they always kind of like touch me in some way. And I think that's the thing, is people relate to you because you're so authentic and you're so real about your journey and what it means to just be living this human experience. And it was a post about you setting up your own studio, which I just think is wild that you were like going to do that, because for people listening, like the technology and making it all work and setting up payments and times and how you're going to do it. Like there's so much to it that unless you're behind the scenes, you don't quite see that, which, you know, you're not really intended to if you're just someone that's going to take the class. But in that episode, you were crying, like you were so emotional and you were ready to quit because you couldn't figure out something to do with the technology. And I remember when I first put up my RocoFit blog, there wasn't these blog things, like it was WordPress and you had to use some sort of like tool. There was something about
it was so hard. The early days of blogging, it was so technical and hard. Oh my God.
So hard to make it go live. And I remember thinking, I am going to figure this out. And then I did, and it went live. And I don't even know how it actually ended up working, because by then you're just so tired and you're trying everything that when something works, you don't even know what that thing was that worked. Anyway, I really related to that post. And first of all, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about, like, why did you decide to do an online studio? Like spin for me has always been something that people go to. They go to classes. They don't necessarily do it online. So talk to me about that process. And then I want to get into that emotional side of it later.
So said leaving London, the studio that I was at, I'd been there for 6.5 years, nearly 7 years. And I taught like 7 classes a week, sometimes more. I had a really foundational group of a lot of riders who rode with me day in and day out. And those were my people, you know? And when we went into lockdown, I remember that was March of 2020, and I hadn't actually announced at that point that I was leaving. And I mean, I knew that I was, but you know, for reasons with the studio, we were kind of holding off a little bit on me announcing that. And as those first few weeks went by, I'm not sure if you remember those, initially they said we'll be in lockdown for 3 weeks,
Yeah.
which is laughable now when you think about it. But as the weeks ticked on, that realization slowly hit in of like, oh, I'm not going to see these people before I go, right? Because my ticket was booked, literally my apartment was packed up, like, so I had this kind of heartbreaking moment of realization of like, these people have been a huge part of my life for nearly 7 years. And this was also, not that it was my fault, but I felt like a guilt almost of like just leaving without seeing anybody and without saying goodbye. And it just made me feel awful because they've just been such a huge part of my career and my success within that company. And people, when I did announce I was leaving, which I ended up having to do over Instagram, which was very surreal as well, loads of people were like, oh, I hope you'll do online classes. And I just was kind of like, haha, like, I just kind of laughed it off because Peloton was a thing, but other than that, like, no, nobody's really doing it. And then obviously, like, as the pandemic went on, God bless every single fitness trainer who somehow magically overnight, online gurus have like managed to set up things and do things online and live stream things. And first of all, shout out to every fitness trainer who did that, because they definitely do not get enough credit for the level of difficulty and skill that is involved in doing that and how quickly they did it. And they were such a lifeline for so many of us during that time in the pandemic that I just think it's so undervalued and so underrated what they did for all of us collectively during that time. And I didn't even own a bike. I was moving countries. It was like I can't think about that right now. That's not realistic for me. But it has come up like repeatedly over the years. And even when I was teaching in Halifax, my London crew would still, they'd see clips of me teaching there and be like, I miss this so much. Wish I could still ride with you. And it's been said to me so much over the years. When I moved here to Montreal, as it turns out, there's not really a big spin culture here in the way that I'm used to it, at least. And that's been quite a surprise to me. And obviously, for people listening who don't know much about Montreal, it's very French. It's really the only place in Canada where French is the first language now, officially. And if you don't speak French, it's a problem. Like, you can't really work here, etc. So I didn't really know that extent of it before I moved here.
Right.
There's a lot of other wonderful reasons to move here, by the way. It's a beautiful city, very green, etc., etc. Very affordable right now. So I kind of found myself here struggling to find a place that would take me on as an instructor. I've found a place where I teach spin now, but it's not frequent enough for me to really be able to make a living. And I just, I've moved cities again, and I'm just like hanging on by a thread. I've got to figure something out so I can keep a roof over my head, right? And the apartment that I moved into, it's really funny. I had to move here sight unseen, basically. I did a viewing over Zoom. Amazing. and then I've just moved here. And at that point, I'd viewed so many different apartments. I couldn't even really remember which one I was moving to. When you reach that point where you're like, I guess whatever, I'll move there, fine.
Details.
Yeah. It's a roof, fine. The place is 2 bedrooms, and which I had kind of forgotten that detail when in amongst all the madness of moving. And I got here and I thought, I have no idea what I'm going to do with that second bedroom. I don't have any furniture for it or anything. And as the weeks ticked on, and just, that room had just kind of become my junk room, if I'm being completely honest with you. And one morning, I was out walking my dog, and randomly I checked my Instagram and I had a message from somebody who it had actually come into like that hidden inbox. So it wasn't even somebody who I've interacted with before. But I guess she must have obviously ridden with me back home in London or something. And she messaged me and she said, I know you probably get this all the time, but if you were to teach online classes, I would be the first person to sign up. And I think she just hit me on the right day, because I was just literally every day up to that point was just, how am I going to live here? Because I'm just coming up against brick wall after brick wall. And she just caught me on the right day where I just thought, maybe that's what I should do. Because on my 5-year vision board, owning a studio has always been a thing for me. I've always wanted to do it. People have always asked me, why don't you own your own studio? And my response has always been like just worry about teaching. If I just want to be able to go and do what I'm great at and go home, you know, like I don't really want the stress of having to run a studio. But I thought about it. I thought, you know, having a brick and mortar studio started to make less and less sense to me, especially if I'm going to live in Montreal. Zero point in me having one here when most of my audience is back home in the UK or now in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Right.
So what's the point of me having, you know, to have a studio here for what? It's going to take me 5-10 years to build up the level of following, etc. And I'm certainly not getting any younger. So I just thought, okay, maybe an online studio is the way to go. And it's hopefully going to give me a way to just be able to make a living and to be able to connect with the people who I've made these amazing connections with over the course of time that I've been doing this. And so from that day, I just was like, okay, I think I'm going to do it. And did a little bit of a blurb about it on, you know, literally kind of talking it through on my stories as the ideas coming to me. I said, I think I'm going to teach online classes. And somebody messaged me off the back of that and said, can I invest? I would love to help with this somehow. And I said, oh my God, do you think if I set up a GoFundMe, people might donate? And she said, I will. And I was like, all right, cool. So I think maybe literally the day after I set up a GoFundMe, within 72 hours, I'd raised about $4,500 or something. And so I bought a bike, I bought a camera, I cleared the junk out of the spare room, and I got cracking.
Oh my goodness. There is just so much I love about that. Where do I even begin? First of all, through COVID, you were right. Like trainers just got online and figured out how to keep serving their clients. And, you know, it was, of course, you're doing it because you need to survive financially, but there has to be a love and a passion for wanting to help others in order to be able to go through what it takes to do that.
Honestly, what a gift, truly, what a gift for us to have these people, right? Who,
yes.
I mean, I'm not a personal trainer. So to have people who can just on the spot put together a little program, put together a 20-30 minute workout and just deliver that to people on the day. And I don't think we talk about it enough, you know, in this kind of, I want to say post-pandemic, but we're still very much in it, if we're being honest. We don't talk about it enough, like how incredible personal trainers were for our sanity during that time, you know?
Well, mental health, I remember at the time, my mom had broken her ankle and I was waiting for my new home to be built. So I moved in with her. And I remember I thought I was just going to lose my mind. Like I was just at an all-time low, had dealt with the COVID divorce and the whole thing and didn't know anyone because no one would be in your bubble. And I remember I started some kettlebell classes. Same thing, I just asked who would want to do it. But I remember thinking like very selfishly, it wasn't financially because I was just, you know, I was fine. I was living at home, but it was for my own mental health. Like I knew I had to have something where I could wake up with a purpose and connect with people. And so there's that side of it too. Like I think for the trainers, and I think that's what gives you like that grit to be able to do it is there's so many levels to it, but to have that connection during COVID was like, for me was a lifeline. You mentioned Peloton. So earlier when I was talking to you about your studio, I couldn't remember the name of the company. Like Peloton's a giant, like everyone is, I don't know about, like, well, I know in the UK, my friend Jocelyn's actually a Peloton instructor. And like, did that ever go through your mind? Like, okay, I'm going to create a studio, but there is Peloton, this huge giant out there, or it wasn't even really like, was that like, oh yeah, if they do it, I can do it. Like, what was your thought on that? Because you didn't mention them. So I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course it's a thing, you know, and I think they're the top at what they do. But it's like, compare it to when I was in London and the studio, I worked at Boom Cycle, which was, you know, one of the first boutique spin studios in London. And we were very, very successful. And I always remember when Cycle moved to London, we had a lot of people coming and being like, aren't you worried? Aren't you worried that Soul Cycle's coming to London? And we were all just like, well, no, because first of all, they were a bit late to the party, to be quite honest. You know, Soul Cycle, they're obviously hugely, wildly successful at what they do in America. I don't know how the studios in London do right now. I'm assuming they do very well because they've obviously got an extremely strong brand. But at that time when they moved to London, there were so many boutique spin studios that like they kind of missed that boat really in terms of really being able to come in and make an impact. But also, Soul Cycle is Soul Cycle, and they're excellent at what they do. That's not going to affect our business at all, right? All Soul Cycle does is actually elevate spinning brand, if you will, within the London community. So really what happens is, okay, cool, maybe people haven't, take someone who hasn't tried spin before, but they've heard of Soul Cycle. Now Soul Cycle are in London, they're going to try Soul Cycle. Cool. But that's now their gateway to try other spin studios in London, right? If they go to Soul Cycle and discover they love it, they love spinning, they're more likely to give some of the other studios a try too. So really everybody wins.
Yeah.
And, you know, even with us at Boom Cycle, maybe our classes weren't for you. That's okay. There's other places to go. And I think I kind of apply that same logic to everything. Do I think I'm going to be a competitor with Peloton? Absolutely not. I'm one person, right? I don't have a global brand machine behind me. It's just me in my bike in my spare room, right? But need to be Peloton. Does everything need to be Peloton, right? Like there's different sectors, there's different people. There are some people who may have tried rides with Peloton who don't like it. It's not necessarily their thing. I've had lots of people tell me and reach out to me and say, why aren't you on Peloton? I would ride with them if they had you as an instructor or whatever, you know, like, and for whatever reason that hasn't happened. Just think like, no, I don't think I'm going to compete with Peloton, but I also think there's space within the market for everybody. You just carve out your own niche, right? So do I need to have thousands of members? No, I'd like to have 100 by the end of next year. That, you know, I'd be happy with that. Like I am but one person, you know, and like I'm not trying to compete or be on a same level with Peloton. You know, that's not my ambition or goal with it.
I just love your perspective because first of all, I just think it gives anyone listening whatever gift they have to put out there. Like comparison truly is the thief of joy. And you could so easily go down that thinking of like, oh, this person or this company is already doing it. Who am I to do it? But really, you're right. There's someone for everyone, and people will come to you because they're attracted to you and what your gifts are and how you nurture that relationship. And so I love that. Like I said, whether you're a life coach or whether you're just someone with this idea and you're like, I don't know, you really give hope for people to do that. And that, yes, you can, there's room for everyone to be successful. Like I've always said that. I always promote other trainers and other health coaches on my podcast, despite having my own course that I sell and one-to-one clients, because I just believe that there's someone for everyone and that there's enough abundance and wealth and things to go around. There's no need to focus on that competitiveness. And if I can help someone by listening, like maybe someone's listening to you right now and they're resonating with you, like how amazing just to know that that connection was made. Like there's everyone with that. So I love that that's your perspective.
Yeah, I think if something is on your heart, you owe it to yourself to do it, right? Like I don't, not that you don't consider from a business perspective, is there a market for this? Is there, you know, supply and demand, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, you're going to think about the logistics of the thing, but also what lights you up?
Yeah.
You know, what is your purpose? And I always think of this line in the movie Sister Act 2, if you'll indulge me.
Love it. Go for it.
So there's a line in Sister Act 2. Whoopi Goldberg says to Lauryn Hill, who's, you know, she has this amazing voice, incredible singer, and her mother wants her to just like, listen, girl, just focus on the studies and like, you're not allowed to sing and just, you know, all this kind of stuff. And Whoopi Goldberg says to Lauryn Hill, if when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you think about is singing, you're a singer. And that has stuck with me literally for my whole life. When I heard that, it lit something in me, because I think as a creative, especially, you know, I started my career as a writer. I still do that now. And I think as a creative, you're constantly faced with those like questions about worth and about value and about where you sit in that pecking order in society, and you're constantly being undervalued and devalued, and the creative budget is always the first thing to be cut, and it just is, you constantly question, why am I doing this? But me, when I wake up in the morning, spinning is on my heart. It's the first thing, like being of service to others in this way. I know I'm good at it. I know it's what I'm meant to do. So I'm not supposed to do that because Peloton exists. Like that doesn't make sense to me. There are people who I can reach with my thing, who resonate more with them than whatever other brand they've tried. And so it's just, you just have to take the risk and dive into it and hope that the net appears, you know? So listen, it's scary as hell. And I'm in that phase right now. I'm just hoping the net appears. I don't know, you know, but I would be doing myself a huge disservice if I didn't try, you know?
Oh my gosh, let's talk about that moment, because I think whether someone's spinning or not, we've all had those moments in our life where we're literally on our knees. It's like, this is that moment where the pull to quit is so strong. And I felt that in that post that you did in that video. What gets you through those moments? Like, how do you build resilience so that you don't quit when really maybe all you see in that moment is just like a darkness, and you don't even know? I think you even said that, like, I don't even know what the next step is. And I know that most people listening, you get to a certain age and you've had those moments in your life where you're like, I just don't know. And the quitting is easier.
Yeah. Oh, it's so hard. I think, you know, I made that decision on a dog walk of like, yeah, I'm just going to go for it. And I really know what it would involve to set up this online studio. I did know I'm really good at what I do on a bike. I'm really good at that. I'll go up against anybody. I would consider myself to be among the best, and I'll say that with my whole chest. Absolutely. I do know, not particularly technically savvy, and I'm about to set up an online studio, right? So like, I'm just like, oh my Jesus, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And so when I say learning curve, it's a learning mountain. Like literally every day I've had to learn something new. And I was relating to what you were saying as you open this up, where you were talking about blogging and just how difficult that was. And back in the day, you know, there were so many technical elements of it to figure out, and you'd fix something and not even understand how you fixed it. Like that's 100% where I am every single day right now. And that point where made this decision, I think end of August. And I thought, oh, I'll have this thing up and running by November 1st. That's going to be my deadline. Well, with each passing day, I literally was like, the technical elements of this that I have to figure out, I don't even know what I'm supposed to Google. It was just, all of it was so technical. Like, I don't even know the words of what I'm trying to describe to give it to Google. Like, it was barrier after barrier. And I'd figure one thing out. It was like whack-a-mole. I'd get one thing figured out, and then 6 other problems would pop up. And then, you know, and I'm just doing it myself. I've moved to this new city. I don't know anybody. I have no community, no connections. Like, I'm just doing it myself, and it's incredibly isolating. And I think that day when I posted that video, I just was really at my wit's end of like, maybe of this and coming up against all of these problems, maybe that's the sign that I shouldn't be doing it. And I just had a moment where I really doubted that. And I was very emotional, because I just living on scraps, you know. I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent. I'm literally like, it's survival, right? I don't come from money. I don't have backing or investors. The GoFundMe funded literally the equipment that I bought, and that was it, right? And that's all it needed to fund. I don't expect people to fund my lifestyle, right? But I'm not coming into this like, with backers. It's just me trying to figure it out. And it's when you're trying to survive and the success of this thing is what your survival is depending on, and today you feel like you're going backwards, it is soul destroying.
Yeah.
But you're a spin instructor, so you've got to be happy, happy, joy, joy for the people, And it's like, part of me is like, I don't want people to see the struggle. But I also thought, you see brands pop up out of nowhere all the time, and there's nobody documents this part of it, where it's actually just your brain is just mush, and you're just, you end each day in tears, and you spent all day trying to fix something, and you might have fixed it, and then 7 minutes later it broke again. And like, I documented some of it, and thankfully I have a good sense of humor, and so I can laugh about the things, but there's so many parts of it that I haven't even told you, because I feel like you wouldn't even believe me if I told you how many other things went wrong. Like, I left out the part where I recorded, finished, and edited 3 videos that I ended up having to completely delete, like because of problems with my computer, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's certain things I just left out completely because it just reached a point where it's like, this is an actual joke, the number of things that are going wrong. And so when we talk about resilience, what I think about is, that woman who has never met me, who reached out to me on Instagram and said, can I invest? I would want to help with this. She doesn't know me that. She doesn't even know me, but she saw something in me.
Yeah.
Think about the numerous riders of mine back in London who every time they've seen a clip of me online have said, I miss you. I wish we could ride together still. So when we talk about resilience, how dare I give up when those people are still riding for me, literally and metaphorically, right? Who am I? Actually, never mind. It got too tough. That goes against my whole life philosophy. I owe it to myself because I know that I'm good enough to do this. I know I have this in me. I just have to get over this rocky period. And the rocky period is necessary. Every single part of what has happened up to this point has been vital in terms of me learning about the equipment. Frustrating as fuck, yes. But vital to the process, right? Of me learning every element of this. What I will say is Rob and Hillary, who were the owners of Boom Cycle, who I was exceptionally lucky to work under, who showed a belief in me that they did not owe me at the time, but they saw a talent in me and they nurtured it from the second that they met me. And they empowered me every day that I worked there. And what I will say about them, the first time I went to Boom Cycle, they were working behind the front desk. And that has been the example that I've seen through a really important part of my professional life. And what that taught me is never too big to be behind the front desk. And that taught me it's very important to know every single aspect of your business. So when Rob and Hillary, when I worked there, when they're asking me or the rest of the team to do something, I'm that much more willing to do it because I know they've done it. I know they know the business. They've done every single part of this. I've seen them clean the floors. I've seen them do every part of it. So that taught me a lot about owning a business and just like, don't, farm it out to like other people. Learn it all first. Not that I have the luxury of farming any of it out to anybody right now, but I would rather be in this frustration and hardship of having to learn it all so that I'm that much more empowered as it grows. It's a really annoying and frustrating part of the process, but an unavoidable one, I think. I hope that answered the question. I'm sorry, I went off on such a tangent.
So incredibly well. There's just so much to like take from all of that. My mind is kind of just like all over the place. One is, I really like how you talk about just needing to get through it. And I always think of it those hard times and the learning process. Like I often think of like university and going and taking a course to become a professional, whether it's a doctor or whatever it is. And you'll have those moments on your knees where it feels so hard, yet you still get up and do it. And then as entrepreneurs, it's like there's this picture that you should just be able to do it and all flows and you're not going to have these moments. Like I remember at one point just thinking, it's my education. This is like me taking a course, only I'm the instructor and the student, right? And so I think accepting that process is what it sounds like you did. And that is, I agree, it's a part that entrepreneurs don't share. And you don't even have to be an entrepreneur. It could be like any part of your life that if you want to do something, you've got to go through the yuck to get to the good part. And I think accepting the process, I don't know if it makes it easier, but it does mentally, in a sense that you're not going to get away without going through that either.
Yeah.
One thing you touched on that we're not going to have time to go into it. I think it's a whole other podcast episode. I probably have you on like 3 or 4 more times easily. But one is that whole part of here's your passion. Here's what you love to do. You wake up thinking about it. And I get that spin isn't just spin. Like it's like anything when you're working with people so closely, they're getting so much more than the exercise from you. It's really life-changing and it has a ripple effect on their lives. So when you say spin, it's not just the actual physical spin part of it, but there comes a point where you need to make money and you deserve the abundance, and you actually can't give your gifts unless someone is actually paying for them. Like it's that transaction that has to happen. I think as women, that's a big topic. So often we undersell our services. We don't feel comfortable talking about how we actually need to make money, and not just enough to survive, but to live abundantly as well. But like I said, that's a whole other podcast. Let's go into life coaching, because I know you're a life coach. Can you talk to us about what is a life coach? Who do you help? Like what kind of person comes to you for life coaching?
So I always say the difference between therapy and life coaching is therapy really helps you to dig into the why and the understanding of a thing. Life coaching, I feel, helps you to take that and then put it into action, right? Like what is an actionable way to be able to like move through your life with this thing? And I got into life coaching because for anybody who's ridden with me in a spin room, coaching is a huge part of what I do. I'm not just kind of shouting out numbers and staying silent. I coach you in a very emotive and motivational way. That's kind of a key part of my brand of what I do. And I would have numerous people say to me like, oh, I wish you could coach me off the bike the way that you do on it. And people would often refer to my rides as like therapy, or, just of really learning so much, of feeling a real certain way after they've come through a ride. And again, enough people had said that to me that I was like, oh yeah, that actually feels like a really natural progression of what I do, is to get qualified as a life coach. So that's what I did. Who comes to me and uses my services? I would say it's mainly women like 30 plus. And generally people come to me in like the nicest possible way when they're just sick of themselves, where they've either reached a crossroads in life and they're very confused about how to proceed, or feel that they just don't really have the knowledge or skills or experience or support to be able to break through to the next phase, or they've been cycle and just can't seem to get out of it, or they feel like life is kind of Groundhog Day and they want to aim for more, but again, they just don't quite have the right foundation or support system in place. And so I kind of think of myself as like, your cheerleader bestie who just is kind of like, oh, you want to do this? Like, and I'll be that like walking affirmation who's just kind of like, you're the best, you can do it, let's go, here's how we can do it, here's how we can make it possible, and works with you to figure out like, okay, what's an action plan that's doable for you right now, and I'm going to hold your hand and guide you through this. Sometimes you're going to be kicking and screaming a little bit, that's okay, but we're going to get through it together. And I think that's what a lot of us just need in life, is that level of support and guidance. Is interesting that I think a lot of people don't realize that is available to them, and B, a lot of times people don't realize how impactful that investment can be for them, right? So they stay in this state of struggle for way longer than they need to, because, well, I'm not going to deny it, it's a luxury to have this kind of a service in your life, right? It requires disposable income to be able to afford it. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't, but I think it pays off tenfold, right? Once you've like come through the process, and you get there a lot quicker with the help and support. But I think it's definitely, for sure, it's a bridge, oftentimes a financial one, for a lot of people. And I think it's also kind of it's a relatively new industry, really, life coaching. You know, people are familiar with therapy, and I'm very pro therapy, by the way. I have a great therapist. I'm very pro therapy. I think that the two actually work really well in tandem. So I would never say get life coaching, don't get therapy, or vice versa. I think they both have a value to offer. And I think, yeah, just life coaching is as widely known just yet as an option for a lot of people.
I love that. I love that we're putting that option out there for someone that hasn't heard it. And you said you get there a lot quicker, but I instantly thought, is like, you'll get there. I feel so much for the woman that just feels stuck, and that stuck feeling sometimes leads to no action, and how that impacts you mentally is profound, and how it impacts all areas of life. And sometimes you just need someone to help you with that next action step. Like, what is that step? And I feel like that's a huge part of what you provide. And if you're wanting to make a change and you're surrounding yourself by the same people day in, day out, that want you to stay exactly as you are, because that's kind of human nature. People don't want you to change. It can feel threatening. They can feel, fear over losing you, or whether it's your time or they're worried you're going on a different journey. And so to keep doing the same thing day in, day out is the definition of insanity. And I think you lose yourself in that. So to be able to know that you can actually reach out to someone, and you're right. And sometimes people think that they need to go to therapy, but actually what they need and what they're looking for is a life coach, but they don't understand. And I love that you actually spoke about the differences, because I do agree that both are needed, but they're very different.
Yeah.
And amazing. And I think that's also what makes you an incredible coach, is like that you videoed. I'm going to keep going back to that video because no one ever films, like very few people share the yucky part of it. And I know I didn't for ages, because you don't want people you think, oh, if they see me struggle and think I'm a failure, why will they come to me for help if I'm going through the yuck? But actually it's watching you go through that process and having that resiliency, and knowing, or like finally coming up with the action plan that shows that if you do it for yourself, you can definitely do it for other people. I think that's so profound.
100%. I think I'm so pro just being fully authentically yourself. I don't know how to be any other way, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
People who have these kind of perfectly curated online personas, I'm like, cool for you, sis. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. I've only ever really been authentically myself, and I'm gonna give you the real. And sometimes my real is very, very hard. There was somebody posted a spoken word poet in their stories the other day, and I reshared it. She had a line in this poem she was reading about on days when I struggle to stay warm in my own weather. And I just was like, oh,
Love that.
How beautifully put, right? Because don't we all have days like that? And I
Yes.
think what I look for and what I love and what I cherish in others is vulnerability every
Mm.
time, authenticity every time. Bring me your broken pieces, right?
Wow.
Like that's what helps you get to the grit of a person. And so, what does it say about me if I'm not willing to show you my gritty bits, right?
Yeah.
If I can't be vulnerable, I can't expect vulnerability from you if I'm not willing to show you mine, right? So, for anybody else who is struggling with the thing, you know, be it starting your own business, I'm going to show you the bit where you literally just want to tear your hair out and you're crying and it's hard, right? Because that is the reality of it. Because what I don't want you to do is go into launching a business thinking it's going to be like the perfectly curated persona girlies, because it's not that. Those girlies are also having mental breakdowns behind the scenes, and that's no shade. That's the human experience. It is what it is. But because they're not showing it, it creates this completely unreal perspective that people are trying to aim for. So I'd rather show you, like, actually, this is what it looks like, and it's like completely up and down and all over the place. But to your point of what you were saying of when people just get stuck, I think what happens is, you know, you get stuck and it dulls everything in your life. And if you think of it as like on old school TVs where you could fade between fade the color down so it was black and white. And I think you kind of you fade the color down so everything's black and white, and you can't, you're just in this cycle and you can't see the color anymore. And I think what a life coach helps you do is connect back into, like, I know you've forgotten, but what's the one flash of color that lights you up a little bit? Let me lead you back to the color, right? And helps you to just gradually turn up the brightness again, to lead you back to your joy and lead you back to like a different perspective or a different path, or, you know, or actually this job is making you miserable, or maybe it's the place that you live is like you are so ready to move on and try something else, or you just need another perspective to come in because you've just been living in black and white for so long that you can't see the wood for the trees, you know? So I think ultimately that's what a good coach helps you to do, is you're really providing all the answers for yourself. You just need someone to ask you the right questions, because you've forgotten what you're so tired. You don't even know what the questions are anymore.
That's right. Yeah, that's amazing. And the people around you can think you're crazy. Like,
100%.
so they'll be like, yeah. You know what? You are the first guest I had on. We just passed our 100 episodes, which was exciting. And I literally haven't gotten through half the questions I had for you the first time. And I think I just love that. You just have so much to give. I do have two more questions that I am gonna
ask them.
So I'm gonna ask you for a little bit more of your time.
Let's go. Oh my God, I'll be here all day with you, girl.
Okay, amazing. The one, because I really want people to go to your Instagram first to start to get to know you if they don't know you already, because there's so much value. Just start there. Like, just start there. And you had this one post that it made me laugh so much, partly because it was hilarious. You are just really funny, which is great. and laughter is, you know, it's medicine, but also because there's a truth to it. There was such a truth to it. And I hope you remember it. It was the shut up post.
Yes, I do remember that one. Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that post?
So I think this is when I was doing 75 hard, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. So I did that challenge 75 hard, which, if for people listening, if you don't know what it is, I always forget the actual task. But basically, it's like a physical and mental challenge where you have to complete these tasks every day. So you have to do 2 45-minute workouts a day, one of which has to be outside. You have to drink a gallon of water, take a progress picture every day. What's the other thing? Read 10 pages of a nonfiction book and follow a healthy diet of your choice, right? So I was doing all of that, and I was on, I want to say I'm like, point was, I think I was 36 or 40 days or something into it. And I woke up that morning, and my outdoor workout was essentially just like a power walk with the dog, right? I would do that every day before I'd go to the gym and do the indoor workout. And I woke up that day and it was like, I live in Montreal, right? So it was snowing, and it was like wet snow that, like, some of it was settling and it was like sludgy. And like, there's some snow that's like that you really have an appreciation for, that's like,
I'm
oh, it's
relating.
cute, crispy, cute, crispy. It's an Instagram moment. This wasn't. It was just like nasty snow. And I probably, every morning I wake up and I journal, and I have this like really intense morning routine. And I try to talk myself out of this walk 72 different ways before I just said to myself, what's up? Like, just go and do the freaking walk. Like, weather is gonna weather. You can't argue with that. It's what it is. And I can either this walk down the road of my day where it won't get done. And the key thing about doing the 75 hard challenge is if you miss any of the tasks in a day, you have to go back to day one. There's no way I'm doing that. So I have to get this thing done. So I just was like, shut up. And I think we all do that. I'm as guilty as anybody else at times, right? Like, we all do that. Like, look for the excuse that is going to give us the best story and the best justification that we can really sit in and feel comfortable and feel good about, like, while we're having our cup of tea on the couch when we should be outside doing the thing that we do. So I was really looking for that story. I was really searching for it so hard. And I thought, oh, just shut up and just go outside and do it. I'd be halfway through it by this point, right? Yeah. If I'd have just shut up and got on with it, I would have been halfway through it at that point. But I'm over here being, freaking like, J.K. Rowling, making up stories about like the best possible reason to like not go and do it today. And it's like, sometimes, you just have to lovingly tell yourself to shut the hell up and just get on with the thing, because you're BSing yourself ultimately, right? That you're begging for an excuse to not do it. And it's like, actually, what is more important to me? Finishing 75 hard or staying uncomfortable in my house for 30 minutes? What's going to be in the grand? Oh yeah, of course. Once I told myself to shut up, I was like, yeah, okay, cool. I went out and did my walk. I just, we live in Canada. You dress for it. You go and do your thing. And I did. I finished 75 hard. I actually just finished it maybe 2 weeks ago. And yeah, I think all of us are guilty of that, where it's just you're desperate for an excuse, but half the time, actually, just tell yourself to shut up and get on with it. You could have just finished the thing by the time.
I love it. I love it.
Making an excuse.
And I asked if you finished. I knew that you would, but I was just curious if you're still like on one of the days. I know I have heard of 75 hard. I know exactly what it is, and I have never considered it. So well done for doing it. But it was so funny. I guess what's so funny about that post is that, well, one, it's true, but two is like, so often the content we want to put out there, or, there's this whole positivity thing, right? And I think that has its place, where you have to tell yourself, no, I can do it. I know I've got this, and you're all positive with yourself. And I just love that it was the complete opposite, because sometimes you have to just do it.
And also sometimes, the reality is, it's not like I really came to this like loving acceptance and I had this really mindful walk. And no, I hated it. It sucked. I don't like being outside when it's raining and it's cold. And sometimes you just got to do it, and it doesn't have to be this kind of curated set of circumstances. And you don't have to, exactly that. Sometimes it's not always like, oh, positivity, rainbows and unicorns. Sometimes it's just like, oh, just shut up and go and do the thing. You're going to feel good after you do it. And I did.
What we're missing a little bit these days. Yeah.
I felt great after I'd done it, but it's like, sometimes you've got to do it when you don't want to. You've got to do it when it's inconvenient. You've got to do it when it sucks, and that's just the reality of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. One last question that I ask everyone that comes onto the podcast, because I'm big into these moments, and I know that at a certain point we've probably had many of these moments, but what is one that you can remember, a moment where you either read something or heard something that was the moment that changed something for you?
Ooh, wow. Great question. What was the moment that changed something for me? I don't know actually that it was something that I did as much as something that I did, which would be it would be that first boxing class that I did, because my internal narrative up until that point, bearing in mind I had been a couch potato for many years at that time. I was very unfit. And so to justify that lifestyle, I had told myself, I'm very unfit. I can't run for a bus. I can't, and that was kind of like a badge of honor for me in a weird way. You know, when you try and kind of flip it and reverse it, and like, I
I've
want to
seen that.
justify it, and I'm going to make this my identity. That like, oh, I don't work out. Really become my identity at that point, and it had not made me feel good about myself, I should say. And so when I went to that first boxing class, just kind of being in that room, having told myself for so many years on a loop that I hate exercise, that I won't work out, being in there and actually just trying and being able to do a thing, being able to like do a push-up. Was it perfect? No, but I did it. Being able to do a sit-up. Great. Perfect? No, but I did it. And I remember feeling, I feel this much more profoundly these days. And I don't know if I necessarily would have identified it as this at the time, but a real gratitude for my body for
Mm,
doing, and like a bit of I felt an amazement at being able to do these things when I had ultimately really mistreated my body for a lot of years. The fact that my body was still showing up for me in that moment was really powerful. And that literally that day, I came out of that and my arms just felt like noodles that didn't even belong on my body. You know, I just spent so like literally an hour and a half was that session of like just hitting a heavy bag. And came out of that session feeling like I'd been rewired of like it flipped my perspective completely from can't to I will. And
amazing.
that moment has really dictated, I think, everything that's happened in my life since.
Love that
Yeah.
process. Oh, that's powerful. Okay, let's talk about how, first of all, how people can get in touch with you. But I'm gonna encourage people, one, to go onto your Instagram. That's the easiest. If someone's like just wants to get to know you, there's so much value in there. I like, even some of those posts have helped me so much. So start there.
Aw.
Second is, if someone wants to spin with you, get onto those classes, because you're not only going to get spin, but you're going to get the life coaching. And I think that's what is your magic. Like, that's what's so powerful. So if you're like, I can't afford to life coach, well, you can afford to do the spin, because
Amen.
I love that. And then from there, if someone's like, no, it's time, like, jump all in and do the life coaching. So what's the process for someone to get in touch with you? Where do they go? What do they do?
Okay, so exactly what you said. So start with my Instagram, which is bangs and a bun, like the hairstyle, bangs and a bun. If you want to ride with me, go to studiobangs.com. If you want some life coaching, go to bangstheconsistencycoach.com. But all of these are linked in my Instagram anyway. If it's too much to remember, just go to the Instagram. They're all in the links in my bio in there. Yeah.
And I'll have it in the show notes too. So it'll be
Amazing.
fun. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I hope that, down the road that you'll come back, because I have more questions for you.
I would love it. Let's do a part 2. I'm in.
Great.
This has
Sounds
been
great.
such a treat. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've loved this chat. Thank you.
Oh, I have as well. Thank you so much. Okay, have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much for listening in today. I know time is precious and I'm grateful you shared yours with me. It would mean the world to me if you felt an impact, a moment of inspiration, or learned something new, if you would share it with those you care about and leave me a review on iTunes. I'd love to know what spoke to you or what you'd like to hear more of. Your sharing and leaving a review would help so much on this journey to making an impact on as many people as possible. It's worth it. I know from experience, there are moments when something we hear has the possibility of changing everything.